Good evening. Leading our news bulletin for tonight, the newer government is now reviewing its immigration regulations and policies for those who would like to gain entry, whether to visit, work, or live on the island. Premier Toketalangi says that the Immigration Act passed by Parliament last year identified the need to set up policies and regulations to guide immigration processes. He says the government is exploring options that may also include a quota system that will apply to all people who would like to come to Niue, and they have also tasked the police department to provide government with figures that will help guide some of their decisions in line with the Immigration Act.
I've asked the police department to tell us how many people have arrived, how many have taken up the option of staying, who gave the authority, what are they doing, when did they leave if they came with the intentions of leaving after a week or thing. I just wanted to know what the numbers are at the present moment with respect to that. And as I've said, I think we're also looking at the possibilities of restricting numbers. So any ethnic groupings, we will say, well, you'll only be entitled to, or in total, we will only allow at any one time, say, 100 people to come on the island for work purposes, work permits and so on. No more than that. That's including all ethnicities. So we should set the policy and then determine the ground rules so that everybody knows what they are, so that there is no uncertainty on anybody's part as to what the government intends, as well as those people who are coming here to help us develop our country. There is a need for us to get more skilled people in specific areas, and I'm happy with that. But we've got to work around how we get those, as well as those people who come basically to be with family and then get jobs. Now, those are the sort of areas that we need to be very clear about to ensure that, in fact, they're not fooling us and we're not fooling them. So mutually, we can work together to ensure that, in fact, we have what I consider as a harmonious society here on the island.
Premier Talangi says the Immigration Act is relatively new and open to interpretation, but government is determined to ensure that the regulations are clear to avoid any legal problems later on.
At the present moment, it's relatively open. So what we need to do is determine how we can not necessarily close the gaps, but ensure that, in fact, the rules are clear for people to work from. So if the person comes here and wants to set up a business, he's got to go through a similar sort of process to ensure that, in fact, he complies. I think the other thing that I didn't mention is the fact that we're finding a great deal of interest from people who are relatively well off, who are very keen to come and stay here. And what I'm trying to figure out at the present moment is if it's possible for those people who are well off to pay us to ensure that, in fact, we maintain the population we have, but also maintain the infrastructure we have so that when they arrive here, they can enjoy the benefits of that contribution on their part to our budget, if you wish. So it's those are the sort of things that we're also examining. It's not necessarily limited to immigration numbers, but what exactly we want these people to do when they arrive, and what sort of ground rules we should put in place.
Despite reports from outside media that the Immigration Office is no longer issuing work permits for Filipinos, Premier Toketalangi says that information is incorrect. Port authorities and stevedoring staff have been in training this week to discuss occupational health and safety regulations in sessions facilitated by two experts from the region. SPC's Maritime Port Security Advisor, Hakamotu Fakapelea, says that some parts of the operations down at the wharf have improved over the years.
From the last 20 years, I have been working around this area in the Pacific, including Cook Island and Niue. Surprised that I went back on Saturday and on Sunday. There were a few things that have been improved, especially the launch of the tugboat, quite powerful, and also the way the ships drop anchor and moored back. They run a line, so it maintain or add on more safety for the operators. The main issue that I have picked up is during the operation is the parts together with the launch. The way they handle it with the container hanging freely from the crane, lucky is not much well that the ships roll from side to side. For improvement, I would like to see that the parts attached to probably a line to the ship, and then the launch can move away for safety, and then when the container on the parts, they come and pick it up and take it to the wharf. I think that's the area they have to be improved. Safety-wise, the crew with the safety clothing and shoes, yeah, they look okay. The other thing that areas that for me I have picked up is the hatchman for the labours on port ships. I know there are some reasons why no one is acting as a hatchman, but from my experience, the most experienced one in the whole team that working on the ships should be the one as we call as a hatchman. He is the one that direct the operation from the start, especially controlling the operation from, he is the one that communicate to the crane operator, and for the people working on the parts, that one missing. So I would like to put that man back, and hopefully that they will come up with the most experienced men, and the safety of the team that working on the ships rely on that man.
The training held over the past 4 days is also based on new training materials developed for the region, and the outcomes from the training held in Niue will also have benefits for others.
This training material was launched last year. It's a new training material. It was developed by used to be the Association of the Pacific Island Ports. Niue is a member, but now they're changing to their new name now. It's a little bit of changing is taking place. Their name now is become the Pacific Maritime Transport Alliance, and Niue is a member of that. So last year during the conference, they put up their hand, the member from here. We need a training of this kind, of the labor or stevedores. So we managed to chuckle around timetable, and we managed to fix a date, and now we implement it. For the future, whatever the material that we develop from here, this will be used by the rest of the Pacific Island countries.
The training concluded today, and it is hoped that operations at the ports will be a lot safer as workers take on board lessons learned from this training to avoid any unnecessary accidents in areas considered hazardous or risky working conditions. Niue is part of regional research, which is the Pacific Media Assistance Scheme Living Baseline Research Project that is currently being administered by ABC International and funded by AusAid. Sandra Kailahi has been on the island for the past week as part of the Regional Research Initiative by PACMAS, or the Pacific Media Assistance Scheme, to look at media from 5 different perspectives that include climate change, NCDs, TVETs, public emergency broadcasts, and media associations across the Pacific region.
There are 14 countries which are all part of the Pacific Island Forum network of countries. This is the first that we've actually gone into the Pacific with Niue. Quite excited by that. And then I'll be going to Tonga and possibly Nauru. But we have a team of researchers, and they will also be going throughout the Pacific to Micronesia and to Melanesia as well.
So the information gathered through this research, how will that be used?
Well, the aim, just as a researcher, is to get all the information. Questionnaires have been developed, and then we're going to take that information, and the lead researchers in the project will take that, they'll collate that and present that information to PACMAS. And it's a 10-year baseline study. So this part of the study is really just to see what's happening. It's a descriptive kind of study in the sense of what is happening out in the Pacific in those areas.
So what benefits are there for Niue in being part of this research?
That's a very good question, and I think as a researcher that's what I'm trying to ascertain at the moment, is really to find out what's happening. It's not really at this stage to see what are the gaps, where the needs are. It's really just to see what's happening and then hopefully from there, on that 10-year basis, we've been told that they're going to use this as the benchmark to look and to compare over the 10 years. It's quite amazing what Niue is actually doing, especially in climate change, NCDs, really all the programs that have been run at a national but also local community level are quite interesting, and also the public emergency broadcasting, what's in place after the likes of Cyclone Heta, but even what you've got in place is really interesting to see what's happening. I can't compare it because I don't know with the rest of the countries, but it's been really good to get that snapshot.
Considering this is a 10-year research project, Niue can expect further visits, but for Sandra, the personal experience has had a lasting impression.
I love Niue. I love Niue. This is my 4th visit. My first visit when I came, I unfortunately had food poisoning before. So when I got here, I only saw from the airport to Matavai and Matavai back to the airport. But since then, I've been back another 3 times. And every time, I get to see something different about Niue. And I think it's a great island. It's really a paradise.
Sandra will depart the island tomorrow. A fishing trip out to sea yesterday morning proved successful for one local fisherman out in Avasele who caught a wahoo weighing almost 50 kilos. Atalase Tawasi is an experienced canoe fisherman who says that at first he thought it was a shark, but as the fish came to the surface he realized it was a pretty large wahoo, and after almost about half an hour of pulling and tugging, the wahoo gave in, and this is the one that did not get away. It was then a feat to paddle back to shore to bring his catch, awaiting weigh-in at the International Wahoo competition. Mr. Tawasi says this is not the first time he's caught a big one, but it truly is a blessing. He also said that fishing from the traditional canoe in these types of competitions is a way of retaining a vital part of our cultural heritage. The main difference, he noted, was that in the past our ancestors would have gone out to sea in large groups, an unspoken code of conduct to ensure that if one was to encounter difficulties out at sea, there would be help nearby, and that is something that should be maintained by the upcoming generations. As for the big whopper of a wahoo, it was destined for the dinner menu of one of the lucky restaurants on the island. This weekend's Sevens rugby tournament has been postponed due to injuries sustained by players at the first leg of the series. In a meeting held with NIU representatives, managers and team captains yesterday, it was decided that the tournament should be postponed until next week to be held after the Alofi North show day. That will mean 1 week for players to recover from injuries and fine-tune game plans to battle it out once again on the field and see whether they can improve on their standings. It is expected that the same 6 teams will be competing in the second tournament, whilst the 15th rugby season is still uncertain. And that concludes our news bulletin for tonight. We do hope that you have an enjoyable weekend and check out the Niue Primary School Assembly tomorrow as they celebrate Ozone Day with the Environment Department.